it's kind of in vogue to sort of treat the world as being in a on the edge of a catastrophic state in terms of, whether it's climate or politics or health or the economy. And basically this idea that things will be really bad and before our lifetimes end, we're going to see a lot of like really harmful disasters and stuff, and almost like to the extent where uh, it's not even worth like investing in your future because it's a you know not just once in a generation, but like once in a civilization level of disaster that's coming our way. Now, the funny thing is, if you go back and you look at multiple generations, you actually see that many, many generations believed the exact same thing, whether it was world wars or plagues or other doom and gloom scenarios, and they were all wrong, right? Like every generation before us did make it to old age, and they didn't see all of this disaster come to pass in the way that they perceived it would. And so, in the same way, I don't think we're going to see it as much as we think we might. There are definitely bad things happening, but there are also really good things happening. Um, and it's easy to only see the one portion of the story, but we also have to remember like there are multiple groups working on solutions to all of these problems, and a lot of the problems aren't nearly as bad as we make them out to be. Simply because like the scale of humanity is so massive. Like 8 billion people and counting. It's just really, really hard to disrupt that level of population. And in a similar vein, Malthus was incorrect about overpopulation and food supply. He was convinced, and yet, we didn't run into those issues. Our population's way bigger than that, and we're still able to manage our resources for the most part. Poverty still exists, but that's not really because of overpopulation. That is more so a logistics issue. But my point in all this is it's still worth investing in your future. It's still worth being optimistic. It's still worth banking on a positive future simply because it's far more likely than not. And it's also something you have like more control over than you might think. Because just focusing on your own retirement, your own wealth, your own health is already like 80% of the job, because that will enable you to have the resources you need in your 50s and 60s. If anything does happen, you have something to lean back on, right? And I think more likely what will happen is there will be advances in technology to the point where if you can afford it, you can have access to a lot of new options that you didn't have earlier in life, whether it might be, surgeries or other things, quality of life, conveniences, whatever it might be. The other thing worth considering is that the internet has really changed the way we receive and process information. So, because of the internet, bad news spreads really, really fast and often gets amplified, especially because it tends to get more emotional reactions than good or neutral news. So, we have to remember we're kind of in an echo chamber of negativity, and you're likely to see negative stories amplified more, even if they aren't the majority of what's really happening in the world. So to counteract that, it's worth considering, for every bad piece of news you read online or hear on TV or whatever it might be, there are probably 5 or 10 good pieces of news that just don't get propagated. And that'll help sort of calm the panic and anxiety. And I think there are higher level organizations and forces that benefit from us being in a perpetual state of anxiety because it will make us short term thinkers. We will consume more, we'll spend more, we'll live more for the present and less for the future, which benefits a lot of these companies because we'll buy their products, right? We'll make more impulse purchases, and we won't necessarily look out for our future selves, which is what they're banking on, right? Like, I recently saw a post where someone said they took on $30,000 in credit card debt and their minimum payment was only $80. And they were proud of this because they felt they had found some kind of hack. What they didn't realize is they were just falling for the trap of consumer debt, and that this was going to be a really deep and difficult hole for them to dig themselves out of. That would likely take them years to pay back if they kept making minimum payments. And this is really fundamentally like an education problem, right? But it also comes down to our emotions. The more anxious and worried we are, the more willing we are to take these shortcuts, right? Like there was that Chase Bank incident where people were fraudulently cashing checks um, to get money that wasn't theirs. And this basically, they thought it was an infinite money loophole, but a bunch of people got arrested. So we have to realize the more we encourage this kind of doom and gloom thinking, and the more we engender it ourselves, the more likely we are to suffer these consequences. And they're completely of our own making, right? We can be 100% responsible for them. So the irony is that believing in the doom and gloom scenarios is actually what's most likely to bring them about. And so the best way to counteract that is to focus on what is in our control right now and figure out what we can build towards that maximizes our odds of living the life we want, regardless of what happens in the future. And that is something we actually have control over.